look into incremental static regeneration for Angular. Let me give you an introduction. I'm Enea. I'm a software engineer working with push-based. I come from Tirana, that is based on Albania. I post a lot on Twitter, where you can also follow me if you want the latest and greatest Angular news. And also I write on Medium, posts around Angular, stuff like that. And the first one on the list is something that was, let's say, shared by some Angular team members, saying it's okay to use function calls on Angular templates. I know that you always somehow disagree, but that's it. And I also do some stuff on GitHub, so open source pull requests on, let's say, sites that use Angular or stuff like that. Okay, incremental static regeneration. Before I go into that, I want to ask you to raise your hands if you have worked with e-commerce sites, landing sites, or blog sites, or news ones. Okay, good. So,
in Angular or generally?
in general. In general, yeah. Okay, so we know that this type of sites need to be optimized for search engines. So in order to be crawlable, so they need server-side rendering. And by crawlers, I'm not only Google, but also Bing, Facebook, Twitter for all their needs. So also they need to be served fast, because they are critical for the, let's say, visitors of our websites, in order also to have lower bounce rate. For example, e-commerces need to be fast in loading in order for the clients to stay in it. Also, they need to be up to date, so know all data. For example, e-commerce sites need to have updated prices and offers and stuff like that. But also the news ones, because they are, let's say, a source of truth, and every time it changes, it needs to be updated. Okay, but how does Angular help with these things? So what does it offer? Let's say the first thing is client-side rendering, server-side rendering, and static site generation. And the last two, let's say, are provided by Angular Universal. And let's see some codes. Okay, the code we're going to see is an e-commerce site powered by Venture.
Yes.
That is from Michael. And, okay. So, don't look at the errors. Now I'm going to start the, let's say, the dev server for the Venture. So this one is just so it's just this repository here. So this is for the Angular one, but there's also the one from, let's say, for the admin part. So I think
It's in the monorepo Venture, the admin part.
okay.
Yeah. Packages, admin line.
Yeah, it's this thing right here. So here I have started, let's say, the admin part, so the backend part of our e-commerce. Let's see the admin UI. So I have it here. So we have products, basic like categories, collections, assets. So a ready-to-market, let's say, e-commerce solution. And then let's see the front-end part, that is the so let's start it. That's what it's best. Okay. ignore these things, please. Let's open the local post. So as we can see, we have e-commerce site with categories, some top sellers, products, and yeah, pretty much it. So, but let's say e-commerce sites, as we said in the beginning, they need to be server-side rendered because the crawlers need to read their specific metadata about that, let's say, that sites have in their headers, but also read the content in order to be more, let's say, to show better on search results. But as we know, by default, Angular serves, let's say, as client-side rendering, and that doesn't give us the power of, let's say, server-side rendering. And I also have to say that client-side rendering is fast. What do I mean by that? As you can see, I have disabled the cache. So the part of the document that gets, let's say, served in the beginning needs only 8 milliseconds, and as we know, this is also a development server, so there is nothing on the serving part that blocks this part, so it just serves. Also, on development, on production mode, it includes server latency and stuff like that, but get the idea.
Is this default field?
Yeah, it's getting updated soon. So this is the old one.
It's just an example, so
So it's just an example e-commerce. So client-side rendering is not SEO friendly. Files can be cached on CDN, so they also can be served fast, and the content will always be up to date because they, let's say, they do data fetching on the client side and will always be, let's say, up to date. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Some time ago I did a poll on Twitter. I have a lot of followers, so I asked how many of them used Angular Universal. I get around 303 votes, and 73 of them said no. And yeah, I know that this is not something that Angular is good at for the moment. New stuff coming. For more, follow me on Twitter. Okay, so how does Angular support, let's say, Universal is, it allows us to use this schematic, so at ng universal /express engine, and it will automatically, let's say, add code for server-side rendering and stuff like, I'll show you. So the default e-commerce, let's say, Angular project that Venture, let's say, serves includes server-side rendering by default. So as we can see here, it will help us with this app server module. That is the server module that, the app server module that will be used when the app will be rendered on the server side. It will has this main export and this server.ts file that is all Angular needs to server-side render the application. So it uses this Express engine. This topic is not on server-side rendering and how it works, but just an explanation. And yeah, every time that it gets an API call, get call on the site, it will render the HTML and just return it to the client, and that's it. That's what all Angular Universal does. So. Okay, so let's see some code. So I want to start with static site generation because that's the part where the site is fast because it will be pre-rendered. And by default, as I said, Angular will include this code for us when we, let's say, execute the schematic that it provides. And let's see. and this is slow because it needs to build the application for production and then open all the sites one by one and grab their content and let's say save it to specific files and their directories.
So it's going to load every product page, make the API call, render
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, make the API call and save it as JSON on the index.html file and use that later. Okay, it's done.
How often is this updated then on the server?
Sorry?
How often is this updated? You said
This
it's up to
package.
date.
No,
You
how
mean
often are they generated?
Because when you generate it, and then what? It's stored on the web server and then
Yeah.
One time when you push.
It will be saved on as a index.html file, just like the production files that we get when we do ngpl. So we'll see now. So as we see on our this folder here, now we'll have browser and server. So this is the server part of the application, and this is the browser one. As we can see, if we only load this, so as simple, for example, in an Apache server, and I use this one. So that's it. Let's say I created a server for it. So this is the server, sorry, the client-side rendering part, and as we saw, it was, let's say, 8 milliseconds to load the page, but also on the, so this is the pre-rendered side. So this is just a page with, so as you can see, we have the same thing. We inspect the elements and let's say open the network, refresh the page, and we can see that the document part loads in 70 milliseconds or faster depending on, so 9 milliseconds. It's, let's say, pre-rendering is, let's say, pretty good when we have things that we want to store in a CDN and, let's say, serve it locally. Because they are just static files that, as you can see, Angular serves them, saves them one by one, so all their content on their pages. But what happens if we change the product? So, see what we have here. Okay, spiky caps. Let's go to the product. And change its name. Update. Okay. It won't be updated, of course, because we haven't rebuilt the site and we haven't.
You can
You have the
It's
wrong
updated.
name.
Hey,
What? No, it works.
what surprise! The dog is cancelled.
A demo that goes better than expected.
Is it making a second call once it loads on the client to the API?
Yeah, but it uses, let's say, transfer state that, let's say, grabs the old request and reuses it. No, it's not good.
Are they?
Yeah,
It's made another new call.
Uh,
But the HTML that will get rendered initially will have the old title.
You can show it in the net. Go to the network tab. You see
Yeah,
the
yeah,
site.
yeah.
Network tab and then
I guess try to source
on the index HTML.
the text initially.
And here in the GitHub, yeah.
Okay, just
citizen request.
we can just disable JavaScript for the moment. So the Angular part won't load. So because Angular by default does destructive hydration, so it loads the index.html file, then so the pre-rendered one, then it will load the JavaScript, and that JavaScript will destroy all it has and let's say rebuild it from scratch with event listeners attached and stuff like that. So if we disable JavaScript, it was working 1 minute ago.
On my local host.
Yes. Wait.
OMG.
In fact, I think I used the wrong serving command. So I should have used this one, not the service. Okay, so okay, we had this spike and cactus. It's not supposed to make an API call. Okay, I will stop here. Yeah, welcome to NG Universal Health.
Maybe could you explain what should have happened?
Yes, it's not reacting correctly, so thing is that laptop. Still does the, let's say, the API call, but it shouldn't because it's pre-rendered. Anyway, let's talk about that. So, static site generation is self-friendly because it is pre-rendered and the whole content of the site exists on the index.html. The files can be cached on CDN and Surface, but the content will be stale, so if it's not rebuilt and redeployed. Then we will check the server-side rendering part. So just by doing the dev SSR command. So it's import. So server-side rendering is rendering the site on the server side. Every time, let's say, a user or visitor opens our website, it will make the server part, store it as JSON on the index.html that it will create, pre-render all the content, and then send that document to the client. But if we see the network request, as you can see, the network part, so the document part of it, takes, for example, around 1.37 seconds. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. So here we see that Angular, also you have to know that this is a development build, not production, so maybe it will cut it by half. So we see that server-side rendering is good because it will serve as, let's say, pages that are SEO-friendly. Site will be rendered on the server side for each visitor. So it will be, let's say, not fast, but okay. And the content will always be up to date because an API call will be made every time so it will be, how can I say, it will be fresh. As you can see, I have, let's say, marked the middle one with orange in order to show that server-side rendering the website for each visitor is not, let's say, a good thing to do because the moment that we start to scale things, it will increase the memory usage of our server and, let's say, it will cost us more depending on our, let's say, providers. So, does all these three methods that Angular provides fulfill our needs? So, for optimized for search engines, serve fast and up to date. So, client-side rendering fails at SEO, excels at two others. Static site generations fails at up-to-date stuff because it needs to be rebuilt and redeployed every time it changes. And server-side rendering is optimized for search engine. Is served fast? I don't know. We'll have to see. And up-to-date, of course. So there are three different things, but most of the time we want something that is optimized for search engines, served fast, and of course up-to-date. We can do it by just combining static site generation and server-side rendering, so their approaches. And Angular has something for that is called hybrid rendering. So hybrid rendering is, let's say, supported by default from Angular. And what it will do is it will, every time, so if we pre-render our website and let's say deploy it, it will serve pre-rendered pages if they are pre-rendered, and also server-side render the pages that are not pre-rendered. For example, the home page is not pre-rendered, and every time a client visits it, it will render that on the server and serve it to the client. But if a product page, for example, is pre-rendered ahead of time and let's say deployed, it will not pre-render it again because that's heavy stuff, so it takes time, and it will, let's say, serve it directly. So this is the default behavior if we deploy something with pre-rendering. So the point of the talk, where does incremental static regeneration helps? So content is always changing on these types of websites, and generating pages at build time. So pre-rendering and deploying them is not a good idea for stuff that is ever changing. And why is that? Why is not good? Because having to deploy the entire site, the entire website, because some products price change is not ergonomic and also has other costs. For example, the build part will, let's say, cost an hour CP and CI pipeline, and deploying part, let's say, for example, if our site is big, it will take also time. The build part can be optimized if you use NX, of course, because it will it will serve the build files on cache, and if you haven't changed the code, it will just return it directly, but not everyone is using NX, and yeah, that's it. Okay, so incremental static regeneration helps with serving static pages pre-rendered at runtime. Okay, let me say it again. Incremental static regeneration helps with serving static pages pre-rendered at runtime. So it combines the ideology of static side generation and server-side rendering into one. Let me say it again. The ideology, not just two of them together. So by caching the server-side the server-side rendered pages at runtime and serving them to users will benefit both the users because the site will be fast, but also the server cost will be low because less thing has to be computed. Okay, as I said, it's just a caching layer on top of Angular Universal. But you may ask why we have cache headers. Why do we need this? The thing is that cache headers cache stuff at the user browser level. So for each new user, the page will be server rendered again and servered to him. But the thing is that for every user, we'll have the server rendered, and this will cost us. And the difference with ISR is that it caches stuff at the server level. So the users will benefit from caching them for other users before they reach the site. Okay, so how does it work? Let's see some code again. Okay, so you can find, so I published a library about it, so it's called ngx ISR. You can find it on npm, and if you just do npm install ngx ISR and do some other configuration, you can have it, and we'll see them now. So of course you need to have Angular Universal installed because, as I said, it's a layer on top of it and uses it underneath, so it's something that is required. So first thing to do is install it, create an instance of ISR handler, and that is on the server.ts file. So I have it here. I'm commenting. So we have just const with new ISR handler. The index.html is the same thing that we have here. Invalidate secret token is something that we may want to use later. Should be replaced with environment secret key. And enable logging through on development, we can say for environment.production and stuff like that in order to remove them, but I also keep them on production. And then this part right here is something that Angular Universal generates by default, and we're going to replace it, so or remove it, and we just have to replace it with this part right here. So this is just Express.js middleware stuff. So for every URL that we get, we want to serve the page if it exists in cache. Otherwise, we will server-side render the page and add to cache if needed. And you'll say, okay, well, how is this different from pre-rendering? Because pre-rendering is already a type of caching that is happening at build time. So the difference is we can configure the, let's say, interval on how, let's say, how fresh do we want our content to be. And how we can do that is we can just go to routes, add a data field, and inside that we can just say revalidate. It's not type checked because we cannot hook into Angular. And here we have three options. The first one is, let's say content will be refreshed. So it will be the same thing as we want this site, this page to be pre-rendered, or this page to be let's say for example, a contact us page, it never had, let's say, it never changes, and if it changes, probably we want to do a build, another build in deploy. And the other one is we can put a number, for example 5, and it will tell the, let's say, the server that, hey, I want this page to be fresh every 5 seconds. How does that work? So how does it keep in sync this 5 seconds interval? It's not a set interval on the ISR part. It's a set timeout. So how does it work? For example, I open a site. At that moment, if I have 5, for example, set, I will trigger, let's say, a hook on the ISR part that says, okay, put a set timeout here for 5 seconds, and after 5 seconds, I want this content to be fresh. And if another client or if another user comes in and opens the site, it will say, hey, I have this page already in revalidation, so you probably will see old stuff. So we will serve to him the old page. But because after 5 seconds another user comes in and the revalidation hook has finished, he will see the fresh site. And this will not be triggered by itself, so it's not something that is triggered every 5 seconds, but it's something that is triggered every 5 seconds that the user comes into our site. So let's say our users have held us our, let's say, hook triggers. Let's see that into action to understand it more carefully. First, I will put it to 0. Let's hope this time it doesn't fail. And yes, we can just use the command of server-side rendering because we don't know that, so just dev SSR. I'm afraid this won't work.
Don't jinx it.
Okay, we are on the product slide. No errors here. Okay, one other thing. In order to configure it, we also need to go to the app server module and include this modular here that I hope is going away soon. And yeah. Okay, so here we have the server-side part. So the first user that comes in, what we do is we server-side render the page for him and serve it to him. But the second one that comes, we will show to him, let's say, the cached one. So if you go to the network, we see that the first one was server-side rendered, and the second one is only 30 milliseconds because. So I'm just refreshing to see that it is serving something that is cached, because it will just serving strings, because that's how index HTML is. Please don't look. Here we updated the product. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So as we set the revalidate 0, it means okay, I want this part to be fresh. 0. If you open elements, how we do that is, as you can see, we have this revalidate 0 and arrows and theory. We'll talk about it later. And we have this comment here that says, okay, this is served from cache, and the last updated part time it was 2 minutes ago. So yeah, it will never refresh. And as you can see, the loggings page was retrieved from cache, page was retrieved from cache, every time that I refreshed. And if I change that to 5. Save. Okay, compile. Come here again. Go to the network. As you can see, we have this revalidate 5. As you can see, this took 1.37 because it refreshed and it did the first call and it was server-side rendered. And if we refresh again, 26 milliseconds. 25, 13, 9. So let's say it will keep that in memory, and every time that we refresh, it will do something like, hey, another regeneration is ongoing. So this one is retrieved from cache. Another retrieve, and after it regenerates, we have this message here that says, okay, hey, it was regenerated, and the next user that comes in, let's say we'll get the fresh one. To see that this works, let's come here. So here we have laptop 1. Okay. Update. Come here. Refresh. Okay, it didn't work, but it triggered it. So, hey, the first one was retrieved from cache, but the URL will be regenerated after 5 seconds, and here it says that, hey, it was regenerated.
Ooh.
And if we refresh, yeah, of course it will. Yeah. And this will trigger for every time we refresh, but only after 5 seconds it will. So imagine this, we have 10 users opening the site. So for example, we are in e-commerce, we create a product, we want to sell it, copy the link, go to Facebook, no, don't go to Facebook, go to Instagram, and that's
Or WhatsApp.
paste the link, and if we were just using, for example, server-side rendering, for 10 visitors, we will be server-side rendering the page 10 times, but with this, we will only serve it once. So server rendering once, and then all the other 10 will get it from him. So, not from him, from the first one that was. And the last user that comes in, let's say, will be the next trigger, let's say. After that 5 seconds is coming. So we set that for 10 users, but if we have 1,000, because if we post the post on the social media, probably it will take more users to hit. And even though we increase the, let's say, the number of users, the server won't care because, hey, I have this in cache, send it. Hey, I have this on cache, send it. Hey, re-trigger this because 5 seconds passed, and so on. So let's say it will benefit your users too, but also your server because, hey, less work for it to do. Okay, but this thing right here is not so cool. We have more cool stuff coming because what happens if we know when we want to retrigger the product? And we want to retrigger the product page when we know that it changed. So we want something like, hey, never retrigger it, put it to 0, and I want to revalidate it when I say, hey, revalidate it. So if I save the page, so this will always be, let's say, static content, so like pre-rendering, so it's the same exact thing because pre-rendering saves the files as static and copies their content when they need to be, let's say, served. It was the thing from hybrid rendering. So pretty fast, 5 seconds, 30 milliseconds. So there is another thing called in-demand revalidation. So revalidate this thing when I say so. So revalidate 0. And we have to add another thing here called URL invalidate handler. This is where we need that invalidate secret token because we don't want anyone to know that, hey, you can revalidate, so everyone can revalidate. So to revalidate the page, we just need to make a GET request to API invalidate and pass with the URL that we want to revalidate. And here, so how can we call it? We all have used Postman. Go change the product on Venture, open Postman and change the ID and we will revalidate it. But yeah, Venture is great, so we can plug things to it. And if we open the page, go to Angular Shop frontend. I created an extension for it, so we can include the extension to Venture. So ISR clear cache module, and I just wanted to add a button to the product page that says, okay, save changes. Okay, now that I have saved changes, regenerate the page for it. So this just adds an action bar item that on click, what it will do is grab the ID of the product and then go to the data service product, get the product using that ID, single one, pipe, take one, always take one, subscribe, and yes, this thing right here is static, but it should be dynamic when we move on production. API invalidate, and then the secret token, of course, and the URL invalidate. And here we say, okay, product, rest, product as plug, because that's the path that we use on the, let's say, server part. So we just do a fetch request on client app, on cache path, and just log the message. Let's save. Here we also see that this part will be re-rendered. No. And if you go to the admin part, here we are on the product page. Yeah, we have to rerun the this is also included here. So just as an extension that says, okay, use this ng module, this file, and move this directory. Okay, it's here. Okay. Let's refresh. Okay, as you can see, we have this regenerate cache. Yeah, that's tested. So we have a page here, laptop, 21 milliseconds. It's just like pre-rendering. We update the product. Also, let's open the inspect to see that the API call. We have to change the URL here. Sorry, but we have to run that server again. Yeah, you can take 15 minutes because it's late.
Would be maybe sometimes to hook under the on click on update.
Yes.
You have one click to make it all, yeah?
Yeah, we have to ask Michael for it.
Answer that.
Tomorrow morning.
It's a bit slow this because we're still on Angular 12, I think, on the
Yes,
admin.
yes, it should be updated.
Yes. Come in version 2. Not so bad.
It's open, refresh. So we have this rail. Okay. Come here. Update the page. Update, okay, we know that it updated here. Yeah, nothing will work because it's, as I said, the same thing as it was before, pre-rendered, and if we come here and do the generate cache, as you can see, product laptop was regenerated, okay, and come here and refresh the page, of course it will be revalidated. Also 17 milliseconds because it will just trigger the hook and that's it. So, that was in-memory validation. So, there's one other thing that is file system cache handling. So, because every time we serve something and add it to cache, it will set it on memory. But memory, let's say we have 1,000 products, we don't want to keep all of them on memory because it will increase a lot. Or for example, search product pages for every, let's say, parameter that they may add, we will serve a pre-rendered version of it, and it's not so good. So the ISR also has this part where we can hook and say, okay, use this type of cache handler and not just file system. By default is in memory. Let's check it now. I don't know. So this is real life coding. I haven't tested it. So on server.ps, here we can say cache. And now I have to open GitHub. So first we have to create a cache handler. This is exported by default. We can upload it. Then we say, okay, use this cache handler. Thanks. So the cache folder part will the cache folder part will, let's say, save the, let's say, pre-rendered pages at runtime on this folder. The pre-rendered pages path is, so this also helps with something else that I will explain later. And yeah, that's it. So if we just refresh the page. And go to this. As you can see, we have this cache folder that is empty by default. Okay, it's not.
Oh,
saved.
do you need to manually trigger the revalidation?
Yes, so I'll change that to B5. As you can see, it also does this thing that says adding pre-rendered pages to cache. So this also hooks into pre-rendering. So if you pre-render the site and serve it, what it will do is copy their content and use that as the first initial content that the user will see. So there will be no server-side rendering at all for that page. But what this does is it gives you the ability to revalidate that part again on runtime without rebuilding and redeploying. So come here, we have this laptop, we go to cache, nothing. Let's open some more. So to retrigger the caching part, we need to be on the product, so on the side, and that will, let's say, okay. Yeah, this is not going to show anything here because we should do a production build. That's how it's supposed to. I'm not going to debug this here, so
Great choice.
yeah, that's it. Next.